The dust on New Sol Colony never settled. It hung in the air like memories that refused to die, coating everything in a thin layer of red powder that came from the broken buildings and empty streets. Hyunwoo walked carefully through the ruins, his blue skin standing out against the faded human structures that once housed millions of people. 50 years had passed since the last human voice spoke across the galaxy. 50 years since the Galactic Council declared Earth's children extinct. Now the 12 alien species that made up the Council ruled the stars, and the Velkari Empire led them all with iron fists and cold logic. Hyunwoo was young for a Velkari, only 60 standard years old. His people lived for centuries, so he was barely an adult, but he had spent his whole life studying the humans who came before. While other Velkari saw only empty planets ready for mining, Hyunwoo saw mysteries waiting to be solved. Today felt different. His scanning equipment had picked up strange energy readings from the old research center at the edge of the colony. The readings made no sense. Dead buildings should not give off any energy at all. The research center stood like a broken tooth against the orange sky. Its walls were cracked and metal beams stuck out at odd angles. But as Hyunwoo got closer, his scanner beeped faster and faster. Something was definitely alive in there. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Yoonji sat in her small apartment on Outpost 7. She looked human enough that most people never guessed her secret. Her father had been Velkari, her mother human. In a galaxy where humans were supposed to be extinct, being half-human was dangerous. She worked at the Outpost's communications center, listening to radio signals from across the stars. Most of the time, she heard only shipping reports and mining updates. But today, something made her freeze at her desk. A voice spoke in perfect Korean, not the broken Korean that some aliens had learned from old human records. This was native, natural, alive. The voice was calm and clear. Junbihara, prepare. Yoonji looked around quickly. No one else seemed to have heard it. The message had come on a frequency that was supposed to be empty space noise. She played it back through her headphones 3 more times, her heart beating fast. Someone out there knew Korean. Someone out there might be human. Back on New Sol Colony, Hyunwoo found the source of the energy readings. In the basement of the research center, behind a wall that looked solid but was actually a hidden door, he discovered a room full of working computers. They hummed quietly, their screens showing data in human writing. The computers should have been dead for 50 years. They should have run out of power decades ago. But they were running perfectly, as if someone had just stepped out for a moment. Hyunwoo connected his translator to the main computer. The human language was complex, but he had studied it for years. Slowly, words appeared on his screen in Velkari script. What he read made his blood run cold. The files were not research notes. They were evacuation plans, transport schedules, lists of ships and passenger numbers. These humans had not died in their colony. They had left. All of them. In an organized, planned evacuation that the Galactic Council knew nothing about. Far from both Hyunwoo and Yoonji, in the deep space between star systems, an old man named Dae-won sat in his hidden base. It was built inside a dead asteroid, invisible to most scanners. For 30 years, he had kept a small group of humans alive and hidden. Dae-won was one of the few who remembered Earth before the evacuation. He remembered blue skies and green trees, real weather and seasons that changed. He also remembered the day the ships came to take them away. Not alien ships, human ships. The galaxy thought humans had destroyed themselves. The Council had found burned cities and empty colonies, signs of war and disaster. They thought they were cleaning up after a failed species. They never realized it was all planned. The human governments had known the aliens were coming. They had detected the Council fleets years before first contact. So they made a choice that no alien species had ever made before. They faked their own extinction and ran. Now, 30 years after hiding in the dark spaces between stars, the human fleets were finally coming home. Dae-won received Yoonji's message about the Korean transmission, just as Hyunwoo was discovering the truth in the research center. Both events had been planned. The humans were testing to see who was listening, who might be trusted when the time came. On his asteroid base, Dae-won looked at the calendar on his wall. Red marks counted down the days. In just 6 months, the first human ships would enter the galaxy again. But this time, they would not be the simple, peaceful humans the aliens remembered. This time, they would be something new. Yoonji worked late that night, scanning every frequency she could access. She found 2 more messages, both in Korean, both saying the same thing: prepare. But prepare for what? Hyunwoo spent hours copying files from the human computers. Each file told the same story. The humans had not fought each other. They had worked together. Every colony, every ship, every person had been part of a single plan. The plan to disappear completely, but the most important file was the last one Hyunwoo found. It was a message recorded 50 years ago by the colony's last administrator, a human woman named Dr. Kim Sunmi. Her words were simple but clear. To whoever finds this record, know that we did not die here. We left to become something better. We will return when we are ready. We will return when the galaxy needs us most. And when we do return, we will remember everything that happened after we were gone. The message ended with coordinates to 12 locations across the galaxy, locations where more records waited to be found. As Hyunwoo copied the coordinates, he did not notice the small device in the corner of the room. It had been watching him, recording everything he did, and now it was sending a signal across the galaxy to the hidden human fleets waiting in the dark. The signal carried a simple message. They are starting to learn the truth. It is time to come home. In her apartment, Yoonji fell asleep listening to static, but in her dreams she heard voices speaking Korean, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were calling to her across the emptiness of space. They were calling her home to a place she had never seen but somehow remembered. The galaxy slept, thinking it knew its own history. But in the darkness between the stars, something was stirring. Something that had been patient for 50 long years was finally ready to return. And when it did, everything would change. 3 months had passed since Hyunwoo found the hidden computers on New Seoul Colony. 3 months since Yoonji first heard the Korean voice telling her to prepare. Now strange things were happening all across the galaxy, and no one could explain them. Admiral Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at reports that made no sense. The Valkyrie controlled the most powerful navy in the galaxy, but their sensors were detecting ghosts, ships that appeared for a few seconds on the edge of known space, then vanished like they had never been there. "Sir, another contact," his communications officer reported. "Grid 77 Alpha, same pattern as before." Ji-hoon frowned. The contacts always appeared in empty space, far from any planets or shipping lanes. They showed up on sensors for exactly 37 seconds, then disappeared. No ship in the galaxy could move that fast or hide that completely. "Equipment malfunction," Ji-hoon said for the 20th time that month. "Replace the sensor array." But deep down he knew it was not equipment failure. The patterns were too exact, too organized. Someone was watching them. On Outpost 7, Yoonji had become an expert at finding the Korean messages. They came every few days now, always on different frequencies, always saying different things. But they were all in perfect Korean, and they all seemed to be meant for her. Today's message was longer than usual. "Daughter of 2 worlds, the caches are ready. Look for the star that died twice." Yoonji knew what that meant. In the human records, there were stories about a star called Kepler 442. It had gone supernova 100 years ago, then somehow came back to life. Human scientists had built a research station there to study the impossible star. She checked the old navigation charts. Kepler 442 was only 3 days away by fast transport. But getting there would mean leaving her job, leaving her safe life. It would mean taking a risk that could get her killed if anyone discovered her secret. Hyunwoo had been following the coordinates from Dr. Kim Sunmi's message. So far, he had visited 4 locations. Each one had hidden computers, and each computer told more of the story. The humans had not just evacuated their colonies. They had taken everything with them. Every piece of advanced technology, every scientific discovery, every cultural artifact. The aliens who came after found only empty buildings and basic equipment. They thought they were seeing a primitive species that had destroyed itself. They never realized they were looking at a carefully staged scene. At the 5th location on a dead moon called Titan 7, Hyunwoo met someone unexpected. A woman was already there, standing in front of the hidden human computers. She looked human, but that was impossible. "You must be the Valkyrie archaeologist," she said in perfect Valkyrie. "My name is So Young. I have been waiting for you." Hyunwoo reached for his weapon, but So Young raised her hands. "I am not your enemy. I am like you, looking for the truth." So Young was human, but she worked for the Threx Commonwealth as a translator. The insect-like Threx had found her as a child and raised her as one of their own. She was one of only a dozen humans known to still be alive in the galaxy. The Threx think they saved me, So Young explained as they examined the computers together. But I remember my real parents. I remember them telling me that help would come someday. The computers on Titan 7 contained something new, technical specifications for human ships. But these were not the simple vessels found in museums. These were designs for ships that could travel faster than anything the Council had ever built. This is impossible, Hyunwoo said, looking at the data. These ships could cross the galaxy in weeks, not months. So Young smiled sadly. Maybe that is why your people thought humans were primitive. You only saw what they wanted you to see. Meanwhile, on 12 different worlds across the galaxy, other people were finding the hidden caches. Most were aliens like Hyunwoo, curious scientists and historians. But some were humans who had been hiding for decades, people like Daewon who had been waiting for this moment. Each cache contained not just information, but physical objects. Genetic samples that could restore extinct Earth plants and animals, cultural databases with human music, art, and literature, and, most importantly, communication devices that could send messages across impossible distances. Yoonji finally made her decision. She quit her job and bought passage on a cargo ship heading toward Kepler 442. The captain, a gruff Nexari crystal being named Captain Bach, asked no questions as long as she paid in advance. During the 3-day journey, Yoonji studied everything she could find about the impossible star. Human records said it had been normal until 93 years ago, when it exploded. The explosion should have destroyed everything in the system, but 50 years later the star was back, burning just as bright as before. When they reached Kepler 442, Yoonji saw something that made her gasp. The system was not empty. Floating near the reborn star was a structure unlike anything she had ever seen. It was huge, bigger than a city, made of metal that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. What in the seven hells is that? Captain Bach muttered. Yoonji's communication device suddenly came alive. A voice spoke in Korean. Welcome home, Yoonji. We have been waiting for you. The structure was a human creation built during the long years of exile. It was one of dozens scattered across the galaxy, hidden in places where no one would think to look. Inside, Yoonji found something that changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. She found other humans. Hundreds of them. They were not the same humans who had left the galaxy 50 years ago. These people were taller, stronger, their eyes brighter with intelligence that seemed almost alien. They moved with perfect coordination, as if they could read each other's thoughts. A woman named Nari greeted Yoonji at the airlock. She looked young, but her eyes held the wisdom of centuries. We heard your mother's call for help before she died, Nari explained. We have been watching you ever since. You are one of the reasons we decided to come back. Come back from where? Yoonji asked. Nari led her to a viewing window that looked out at the star. From the space between galaxies. From the places where no one else dared to go. We have been building something out there, Yoonji. Something that will change everything. As they talked, reports came in from across the galaxy. More sensor ghosts, more impossible contacts. The hidden caches had done their work. People were starting to ask questions about human extinction. They were starting to wonder if the official story was true. On his flagship, Admiral Ji-hoon received a report that made him call an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. A Threx exploration ship had detected massive energy signatures in the void between galaxies. The signatures were moving toward their galaxy at incredible speed. How long until they arrive? The council asked. At current speed, Ji-hoon calculated, 6 months. Maybe less. No one asked what the signatures might be. They all assumed it was some unknown alien force, another species to negotiate with or fight. None of them considered that it might be something returning home. But in the hidden human stations scattered across the galaxy, countdown timers ticked toward 0. The exiles had spent 50 years becoming something new, something powerful enough to reclaim what they had lost. And now they were coming home. Hyunwoo and So Young continued their investigation, finding more caches, more evidence. Each discovery painted a clearer picture. Humanity's extinction had been the greatest deception in galactic history. Yoonji learned to use human technology that seemed like magic. Devices that could make her invisible, machines that let her speak with people on the other side of the galaxy instantly. The humans had not just survived in exile, They had transcended everything the galaxy thought possible. The Galactic Council prepared for war against an unknown enemy. But they were preparing for the wrong kind of war. This would not be a battle between equals. This would be a reckoning. In the deep void, the human fleets detected the Council's military preparations. Admiral Tae-hyun, commander of the returning forces, smiled grimly as he read the reports. The aliens still thought in terms of traditional warfare. They had no idea what was coming for them. "How long until we reach the outer systems?" he asked his navigator. 4 months, sir. Should we send an advance warning? Tae-hyun considered this. The old humans might have tried diplomacy first. But the old humans had also been nearly exterminated. The new humans had learned different lessons. No warning, he decided. Let them discover us the same way we discovered their true nature. Let them learn what surprise feels like. In the dark between the stars, 1,000 ships that looked like living creatures began to accelerate toward home. The first human ship entered the galaxy on a Tuesday morning, standard time. It appeared exactly where the Velkari had detected their ghost contacts for months, but this time it did not disappear after 37 seconds. It stayed, broadcasting. A simple message on all frequencies. "We have returned." Admiral Ji-hoon was in the middle of breakfast when the alert came through. He dropped his cup and ran to the bridge, still wearing his sleeping clothes. What he saw on the main screen made him forget to breathe. The ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Its hull seemed to be made of flowing metal that shifted colors like oil on water. It was huge, bigger than any vessel in the Velkari fleet, but it moved with the grace of a living creature. No visible engines, no obvious weapons, but it radiated, power that made every sensor on Ji-hoon's flagship scream warnings. "Sir, they are responding to our hails," the communications officer reported. Her voice shook slightly. "Put them through," Ji-hoon ordered. The face that appeared on screen was human, but changed. The man's features were sharper than any human. In the historical records, his eyes brighter, his movements perfectly controlled. When he spoke, his voice carried authority that seemed to reach into the soul. "I am Admiral Tae-hyun of the Human Confederation Fleet. I wish to speak with the current rulers of this galaxy." Ji-hoon tried to sound confident. "I am Admiral Ji-hoon of the Velkari Empire. Humans are extinct. You cannot be what you claim to be." Tae-hyun's smile was cold as winter stars. "Extinction is such a final word, Admiral. We prefer to think of it as a temporary absence." Within hours, the news spread across the galaxy. Humans had returned. Not as refugees or survivors, but as something new and powerful. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives of all 12 species gathered on the neutral world of Nexus Prime. But the humans did not come to the council meeting. Instead, they sent a single message to every government. "We will speak only with those who have something to return to us." Hyun-woo was on his way back from another cache location when the news reached him. He sat in his small ship, staring at the images of the human vessel. Everything he had discovered suddenly made sense. The evacuation plans, the advanced technology, the careful staging of their own extinction. It had all been preparation for this moment. His communication system buzzed. A new message, imperfect. "Velkari, archaeologist Hyun-woo, you have been learning our history. Would you like to learn our future? Coordinates attached." Hyun-woo looked at the coordinates. They led to a location in empty space, far from any inhabited system. It could be a trap. It probably was a trap. But he had spent his whole life studying humans, and now he had a chance to meet them. He changed course without hesitation. Meanwhile, Yoonji had become the humans' first ambassador to the current galaxy. From the hidden station at Kepler 442, she helped coordinate contact with the scattered human survivors. There were more than anyone had imagined. Small groups hiding on dozens of worlds, keeping their heritage secret for 50 years. "How many of us are coming back?" she asked Nari. 2 million, Nari replied calmly. "We started with 50,000 survivors. 50 years in exile has been very productive. 2 million humans, all with technology that made the Galactic Council's best ships look like toys." Yoonji began to understand why the returning humans felt so confident. The Council's response was exactly what the humans expected. "Supreme Chancellor." Chan Wu of the Velkari Empire declared the returning humans to be imposters. He claimed that real humans could never have advanced so far beyond their primitive origins. He demanded they submit to council authority and accept their place as a minor species. Admiral Taehyun's response was swift and educational. He chose a Velkari patrol fleet that was harassing a human supply convoy near the Rigel system. The patrol consisted of 12 modern warships, all armed with the latest council weapons. They surrounded the single human transport and demanded its surrender for inspection. The human ship did not fight back. It did not fire weapons or raise shields. Instead, it did something that should have been impossible. It simply turned off the Velkari ships. Every system on every Velkari vessel stopped working at exactly the same moment. Engines died, weapons powered down, life support switched to emergency backup. The crews found themselves floating helpless in space, completely dependent on their environmental suits. Then Taehyun's voice came through their emergency radios. Your ships will restart in exactly 1 hour. Use that time to think about what might happen if we were less patient. True to his word, the Velkari ships came back online after 60 minutes. Every system worked perfectly, as if nothing had happened. But the message was clear. The humans could have destroyed the entire patrol fleet without firing a shot. Yun Wu reached the coordinates and found himself facing the impossible. A human city floated in the void, bigger than most space stations, but clearly organic in design. It pulsed with soft light and seemed to breathe like a living creature. A shuttle approached his ship, piloted by a young human who introduced himself as Wu Jin. He had been born during the exile, had never seen the galaxy his people once called home. Is it true that aliens live on our old worlds now? Wu Jin asked as they flew toward the city. Yes, Hyunwoo replied. My people, the Velkari, control most of the former human territories. Wu Jin nodded thoughtfully. Admiral Taehyun says we should not blame the children for the crimes of their parents. But it is hard not to feel angry when we see what was taken from us. Inside the living city, Hyunwoo met the humans who would reshape the galaxy. They were not like any species he had studied. They moved with perfect coordination, spoke in voices that harmonized like music, and their technology responded to thought as much as touch. You have been honest in your research, Admiral Taehyun told him. Your work helped us understand how thoroughly our extinction was believed. Now we need your help with something else. What do you want from me? We need you to show your people what really happened 50 years ago. We need them to understand that we did not abandon this galaxy. We were driven from it. Taehyun led Hyunwoo to a chamber filled with recording devices. What he saw there made his blue skin turn pale. Recordings of Velkari ships hunting down human refugees. Velkari soldiers destroying human settlements that had already surrendered. Velkari scientists experimenting on captured humans like they were laboratory animals. We were never a threat to you, Taehyun said quietly. We were explorers, scientists, artists. We wanted to learn about the galaxy, not conquer it. But your people saw us as competition for resources. The recording showed the truth that had been hidden from the galaxy. The human evacuation had not been planned originally. It had been forced by systematic attacks from council forces who wanted human worlds for themselves. My people believe we saved this galaxy from human self-destruction, Hyunwoo said, his voice barely a whisper. Your people believe what they were told to believe, Taehyun replied. The truth is different. We left because staying would have meant war, and we knew we would lose. So we chose exile instead of extinction. But exile had changed them. 50 years in the cold dark between galaxies had forced humanity to evolve or die. They had chosen evolution. They had become something that could survive anywhere, create anything, achieve things that other species thought impossible. Now they were back, and they wanted justice. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for 3 days straight. Some members wanted immediate military action against the returned humans. Others suggested negotiation. A few quietly wondered if their own history books might be missing important details. Admiral Ji-hoon found himself in an impossible position. His superiors wanted him to prepare for war against an enemy that could disable his ships with a thought. His own research into human technology suggested that such a war would be very short and very one-sided. On the third day of debates, the humans made their position clear. They did not send a message to the council chambers. Instead, every communication device in the galaxy received the same transmission at the same time. It was a simple list. Names, dates, locations, every atrocity committed against humans during the evacuation period. Every lie told about human extinction. Every piece of human territory that had been claimed by aliens who knew the truth. At the end of the list was a single demand: return what was stolen, and face justice for what was done. You have 30 days to respond. The galaxy held its breath. For 50 years, the Galactic Council had ruled with overwhelming force. Now they faced an enemy that made their greatest weapons seem like toys. In his private chambers, Supreme Chancellor Chan Wu stared at reports from his intelligence services. The humans had not returned alone. Ships from a dozen different species, all thought extinct, were emerging from the void. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had not been the Council's only victim. The countdown had begun. In 30 days, the galaxy would discover what justice looked like when it came from the stars. The Galactic Council's answer came on day 29. Supreme Chancellor Chan Wu stood before the assembled representatives and declared that the Council would never bow to terrorist demands. The humans, he said, were dangerous criminals who threatened the peace of the galaxy. Admiral Ji-hoon received his orders that same day: destroy the human forces before they could establish themselves in Council space. He was given command of the largest fleet ever assembled, 2,000 warships from 6 different species. The pride of galactic civilization, armed with weapons that could crack planets. But as Ji-hoon prepared his forces, he could not forget what he had seen. A single human ship disabling an entire patrol fleet without firing a shot. If they could do that to 12 ships, what could they do to 2,000? The human response was swift and personal. Admiral Tae-hyun sent a message directly to Ji-hoon's flagship. Admiral, you are an honorable soldier following orders. We do not wish to fight you. Stand down your fleet and no harm will come to your crews. Ji-hoon stared at the message for a long time. His orders were clear. His duty was absolute, but his survival instincts were screaming warnings. He activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Ji-hoon. We advance to contact with enemy forces. Remember, we fight for the peace and security of the galaxy. What Ji-hoon did not know was that his fleet had been watched since the moment it left port. Human ships moved invisibly through space, their advanced stealth technology making them undetectable to Council sensors. They counted every vessel, mapped every weapon, analyzed every weakness. The battle would take place near Kepler Station, a massive trading post that served ships from across the galaxy. Thousands of civilians worked there, believing they were safe in neutral space. They had no idea they were about to witness the most one-sided battle in galactic history. Yoon-ji stood on the bridge of the human command ship, watching the Council fleet approach. 2,000 ships spread across space like a metal storm, their weapons already charging for battle. It seems like a lot, she said to Nari. Numbers mean nothing when your enemy controls technology you cannot understand, Nari replied. Watch and learn how the new humans fight. The human fleet was much smaller. Only 200 ships faced the Council armada. But as they moved into position, something strange began to happen. The human vessels seemed to flow like water, their formations shifting and changing in ways that made no tactical sense. Admiral Ji-hoon gave the order to fire when the fleets were still 1,000,000 kilometers apart. Thousands of energy weapons lit up space, sending waves of destruction toward the human ships. It should have been the end of the battle before it truly began. But the human ships simply were not there when the weapons arrived. They had moved, but not in any way that Council sensors could track. One moment they were in the path of incoming fire, the next they were somewhere else entirely. The massive volley of Council weapons struck empty space. Impossible, Ji-hoon whispered. No ship can move that fast. The human counterattack was unlike anything in galactic military history. They did not fire energy weapons or launch missiles. Instead, they did something far more terrifying. They reached out with invisible forces and began taking the Council ships apart. Hull plates peeled away like flower petals. Weapon systems simply stopped working. Engines froze in place. One by one, Council warships found themselves helpless, their crews trapped inside vessels that no longer responded to commands. But the humans were careful. Life support remained active. Emergency systems continued to function. No one died, but 2,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warships were reduced to floating scrap metal in less than an hour. On Kepler Station, civilians watched through observation windows as the impossible unfolded. A small human fleet had just destroyed the largest military force ever assembled, and they had done it without killing a single enemy soldier. Captain HFY of the Threx Commonwealth watched her ship's weapons fail one by one. She was a veteran of a dozen battles, but she had never seen anything like this. The humans fought like they controlled the laws of physics themselves. Her communication system crackled to life, a human voice speaking perfect Threx. Captain HFY, your service record shows you have never fired on civilian targets. Your crew will be released unharmed. Please prepare to abandon ship. HFY looked around her bridge. Her officers stared back with expressions of shock and confusion. In 30 years of military service, she had never encountered an enemy who knew her name or cared about her honor. Who are you? She asked. We are the children of those your people helped hunt to extinction, the voice replied. But we are also something new, something that believes in justice over revenge. Across the battlefield, similar conversations were taking place. The humans had detailed records of every council officer, every ship captain, every soldier. They knew who had committed atrocities against civilians and who had served with honor. They treated each accordingly. Admiral Ji-hoon found himself alone on his bridge as his crew evacuated to rescue ships. The humans had offered safe passage to anyone who laid down weapons, and most had accepted gratefully. Only Ji-hoon remained, bound by duty to go down with his flagship. Admiral Tae-hyun appeared on his communication screen. Admiral, your fleet is defeated, but your honor remains intact. You fought bravely against impossible odds. What are you? Ji-hoon asked. How can you do these things? We are what humanity became when we stopped limiting ourselves to what others thought possible, Tae-hyun replied. 50 years in exile taught us that survival requires evolution. During the battle, human ships had been broadcasting on all frequencies. But these were not military communications. They were recordings from 50 years ago, voices of human children crying for their parents as council soldiers dragged them away. Human scientists begging for mercy as their research stations were destroyed. Human refugees calling for help that never came. The galaxy heard the truth for the first time. The human extinction had not been a tragedy. It had been a crime. On thousands of worlds, civilians who had never questioned their history began to ask uncomfortable questions. If their governments had lied about the humans, what else had they lied about? Hyunwoo watched the battle from the human command ship, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Everything he thought he knew about warfare, about technology, about the nature of reality itself was being rewritten before his eyes. Your people will adapt, Nari told him gently. The young ones always do. It is the old ones who have trouble accepting change. The battle ended with Admiral Ji-hoon's formal surrender, but the humans did not accept it in the traditional way. Instead of taking prisoners or claiming territory, they did something unprecedented. They offered mercy. Every council soldier was given a choice: return home with the truth of what had happened, or stay and learn about the new reality. Many chose to stay. They had seen something impossible and they wanted to understand it. Captain HFY was among those who stayed. As her escape pod was brought aboard a human ship, she found herself in corridors that seemed to pulse with life. The walls were warm to the touch and the air smelled of growing things. Your ships are alive, she said to the human who greeted her. All technology should serve life, the human replied. Your people build tools. We grow partners. The news of the battle reached the Galactic Council within hours. 2,000 ships destroyed without a single human casualty. It should have been impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. Supreme Chancellor Chan Woo called another emergency session. This time the debate was very different. Some representatives demanded immediate surrender, others suggested negotiation. A few quietly began planning their own separate peace with the humans. But the humans were not interested in negotiating with the Council. Instead, they began broadcasting from every communication satellite in the galaxy. The signals carried detailed evidence of Council crimes, documents, recordings, testimony from survivors. The galaxy learned that humans had not been the only victims. The Council had a long history of liberating species that possessed valuable resources or strategic locations. The official history of galactic civilization was built on lies and covered-up genocides. On his asteroid base, old Daewon watched the broadcasts with tears in his eyes. For 30 years he had carried the burden of truth alone. Now the galaxy was finally ready to hear it. Young Dongmin, captain of the human ship carrying Earth's last refugees, stood before a crowd of alien reporters. They had come expecting to interview primitive survivors. Instead, they found people who had spent 50 years becoming something beyond their comprehension. "What do you want from us?" one reporter asked. "We want what was always ours," Dongmin replied. "We want our worlds back. We want justice for our dead. And we want to make sure this never happens again to anyone." The reporter pressed further. "Will you conquer the galaxy?" Dongmin smiled sadly. "Conquest is what brought us to this point. We have learned a better way." As the human fleets moved deeper into galactic space, they began revealing their true numbers. Not hundreds of ships, but thousands. Not millions of humans, but tens of millions. The exile had been more successful than anyone had imagined. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The humans had not. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Kepler Station. The galaxy looked very different now. Where once the Galactic Council had ruled with absolute authority, now a new order was taking shape. The humans had kept their promise. They had not conquered the galaxy. Instead, they had done something far more radical. They had given it justice. Judge Young-Soo sat in a courtroom that floated in space above the ruins of New Seoul Colony. The courtroom itself was a marvel of human technology, its walls transparent to show the stars beyond. Today, he would deliver the verdict in the trial of Supreme Chancellor Chan Wu. The evidence had been overwhelming. For 50 years, Chan Wu had known the truth about human extinction. He had helped plan the attacks that drove humanity into exile. He had personally ordered the destruction of human research stations and the capture of human civilians for experimentation. "The defendant will rise," Young-Soo announced. Chan Wu stood slowly. The proud Valkyrie leader looked much older than his years. The trial had broken him in ways that war never could. For the first time in his life, he had been forced to face the consequences of his actions. "Chan Wu of the Valkyrie Empire," Young-Soo continued, "you have been found guilty of crimes against sentient life, genocide, and conspiracy to conceal evidence of war crimes. However, this court recognizes that you were not alone in these actions. You were part of a system that valued power over justice." Young-Soo paused, looking out at the gallery filled with beings from across the galaxy. Humans sat next to Valkyrie, Threx beside Nixari, former enemies now working together to build something better. Therefore, this court sentences you to life in service to the restoration of the worlds you helped destroy. You will work alongside the families of your victims to rebuild what was lost. You will learn what it means to create instead of destroy. It was not the death sentence that many had expected. The humans had surprised the galaxy again. Their justice was about healing, not revenge. Admiral Ji-hoon had made a different choice. After his capture, he had asked to join the human effort to reform galactic civilization. Now he served as military advisor to the new cooperative assembly, helping to design defense forces that protected rather than conquered. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Andorian delegation has arrived for the integration ceremony." Ji-hoon nodded and walked to the observation deck. Below, a massive human ship was approaching the Andorian homeworld. But this was not an invasion fleet. It was a gift. The Andorians had been extinct for 200 years, or so the galaxy had believed. In truth, they had fled to the void between galaxies just as humanity had done. Now they were coming home with human help and human protection. The integration process was the humans' greatest achievement. Species that had been driven to near extinction were being restored. Worlds that had been strip-mined were being healed. The galaxy was learning what it meant to truly cooperate. Yoonji had become the first human-alien relations coordinator, a position that did not exist before the return. She worked from a station that orbited Earth, not the dead, radioactive Earth of Council propaganda, but the living, breathing world that humans had carefully restored during their exile. "The Rigelian refugees are ready for resettlement," her assistant Soo-jin reported. Soo-jin was Valkyrie, one of thousands who had chosen to work with the humans rather than cling to the old order. "Which world have they chosen?" Yoonji asked. Surprisingly, they want to share Rigel 7 with a human colony. They say they want to learn from each other. This was happening across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for generations were choosing to live together, to learn from each other. The human example had shown them a different way to exist. On Outpost 7, where Yunji had first heard the Korean voices calling her home, a new kind of communication center was taking shape. Instead of monitoring radio signals for threats, operators now helped coordinate aid and support across the galaxy. The same frequencies that once carried messages of war now carried songs of hope. Captain Haiwan had become something she never thought possible, a human ship captain. The living vessels responded to her commands as if she had been born to the role. Her crew was mixed, Threx, Velkari, human, and Nexari all working together with perfect coordination. "Ma'am, we're receiving a distress call from the Vega system," her communications officer reported. "What's the situation?" "Asteroid collision with a mining station. 70 beings trapped inside." Haiwan smiled. A year ago, her people might have calculated the cost of rescue against the profit of the mining operation. Now the choice was simple. Set course for Vega. Maximum speed. Her ship responded instantly, flowing through space like a living creature. They would reach the trapped miners in hours instead of days. Another small victory for the new way of thinking. Hyunwoo had found his true calling as a restoration archaeologist. Working with human historians, he helped uncover the real history of galactic civilization. The truth was often painful, but it was necessary. Only by understanding the past could they build a better future. Today he was working on Kepler 442, the impossible star that had become a symbol of renewal. Human technology had indeed caused the star to die and be reborn. It had been an experiment in stellar engineering that went beyond, anything the galaxy thought possible. The records are complete, his partner Nari announced. She had become his closest friend and collaborator, teaching him to see history through human eyes. "What did we learn?" Hyunwoo asked. "The star was dying naturally. The humans found a way to save it, to give it new life. It was a gift to the galaxy, something beautiful created just because they could. This was what the aliens had never understood about humanity. Humans did not create only for profit or power. They created for the joy of creation itself." Admiral Tae-hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the last Council military base was peacefully converted to a research station. The transformation of galactic society was nearly complete, but the real work was just beginning. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're receiving signals from the Magellanic clouds. It appears there are more survivors out there." Tae-hyun smiled. Each month brought new discoveries. Species thought extinct for centuries were still out there, still hoping for rescue. The galaxy was much more alive than anyone had imagined. "Prepare a first contact team," he ordered. "It's time to bring more of our family home." The aide paused. "Sir, some of these species were extinct before humans ever reached the stars. They've been in exile for thousands of years." "Then they've waited long enough," Tae-hyun replied. "No one stays lost forever. Not anymore." As the months passed, the new order solidified. The Cooperative Assembly had replaced the Galactic Council, with representation based on need rather than military power. Decisions were made by consensus, with human mediators helping species find common ground. Young engineer Jamin led the terraforming efforts that restored devastated worlds. Human technology could heal damaged ecosystems in decades instead of centuries. Dead worlds came back to life, their skies clearing and their oceans returning. "The work is hard," he explained to a group of alien visitors, "but it is the right kind of hard. We're not destroying anything. We're helping things grow." The visitors, former council officials learning about the new methods, watched in amazement as seeds became forests in fast motion, as polluted rivers ran clear again. On distant worlds, human teachers worked with alien students, sharing knowledge that had once been hoarded by governments. The technology that had defeated the council fleet was being adapted for peaceful purposes. Ships that could move through space like living creatures now carried medicine and supplies to remote colonies. But perhaps the most important change was in how people thought about each other. The old galaxy had been built on the idea that resources were scarce, that conflict was inevitable. The humans showed a different truth. The universe was vast enough for everyone, and cooperation achieved more than competition ever could. Old Day One, now living comfortably on restored Earth, often walked through the gardens that covered his old asteroid base. Young people came to hear his stories of the dark times when humans had to hide their very existence. Will it last? They asked him. Will the galaxy stay peaceful? Day One would smile and point to the stars. As long as we remember that we're all passengers on the same ship, sailing through the same dark ocean. As long as we help each other instead of fighting each other. One evening, as two suns set over New Sol Colony, now rebuilt and bustling with life from a dozen species, Yunji received a message that made her laugh with joy. It was from the deep void, from exploration ships that had ventured beyond even the Magellanic Clouds. Yunji, the message said in perfect Korean. You're not going to believe what we found out here. Turns out the universe is even more crowded than we thought. We've got a lot more family to bring home. She looked out at the mixed crowds walking through the colony's streets. Humans and Velkari children played games together. Threx artists collaborated with Nexari musicians to create art that neither species could achieve alone. Former enemies had become friends, and friends had become family. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson of all, that survival was not about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being willing to help others survive too. In the end, that was what made